The Austin Convention Center was a spectacle of glitz and glamour tonight for TechCon, the premier technology event of the year. I smoothed my deep burgundy cocktail dress as I waited for Derek to join me after mingling with investors. My husband had been actively pitching his new enterprise data security firm, CipherShield, to venture capitalists here. Across the crowded hall, I spotted Derek engaged in an intense discussion with Cassidy Wells, one of his employees. I knew Derek placed a lot of trust in the young software developer, but her body language seemed overly familiar. She stood entirely too close, practically whispering in his ear, with her fingers lingering on his forearm. A knot twisted in my stomach. Needing some air, I made my way through the crowd toward the open-air balcony. As I passed by them, Cassidy's words made me freeze in my tracks. "I hate having to sneak around like this," she murmured in a hushed tone. Derek glanced around furtively before responding in a low voice. "It's just until I can clean up this mess with Emilia." My heart pounded as his meaning washed over me in waves of disbelief and sickening realization. I stumbled outside, struggling to catch my breath. The cool night air provided little relief. "Hey, you okay?" A familiar voice broke through my daze. Vincent stood beside me, his thick-rimmed glasses illuminated by the glowing city skyline. "I think Derek is cheating on me." I managed to choke out the words, feeling them rip through my chest. Vince pulled me into a tight embrace. I'm so sorry. What happened?" Steadying myself, I recounted the exchange I'd overheard between Derek and Cassidy. Vince's face contorted with anger as the gravity of the situation sank in. "That bastard! After everything you've sacrificed to support his career?" His voice dripped with disdain. "We need to gather evidence and bring that slimeball down." I nodded, fists clenched with determination. Derek's deceit had shattered my world, but I refused to be a victim. If he thought I would go down without a fight, he was gravely mistaken. My mind raced as I formulated the first steps of my plan. "Vince, I need you to dig up whatever you can on Cassidy and any financial discrepancies at CipherShield. There's no way he could sustain an affair and keep that startup afloat legitimately." "Consider it done," Vince affirmed resolutely. "I've got contacts that can access all sorts of records. We'll make that lying sack of—" "Emilia?" Derek's voice cut through our hushed conversation. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." I spun around, anger flaring as I met the concerned gaze of the man I once trusted completely. Keeping my expression neutral, I willed myself to remain composed as deception after deception flashed through my mind. "Sorry, I just needed some air," I replied flatly. "Shall we head home? I'm feeling a bit under the weather." "Of course, baby." Derek gave my arm a reassuring squeeze as we said our goodbyes to Vince and made our way to the valet. The ride home was thick with leaden silence. I stared vacantly out the window, fear and fury churning within me. Tonight's unveiling had set in motion a series of events that would ultimately unravel Derek's web of lies. He had shattered the loving oath we had taken, violated the sanctity of our marriage. For that, he would face the consequences. It was only a matter of time before the truth came crashing down upon him. And when it did, I would be ready to embrace my newfound freedom by letting the scales of justice solely in my favor. Over the following weeks, I kept a calculated distance from Derek, my affections turned to icy indifference. Meanwhile, Vince worked tirelessly to unearth any digital trail of Derek's misdeeds. I combed through months of credit card statements, Vince updated me one evening at his apartment. Lots of expensive dinners, hotel rooms, you name it, all the hallmarks of a tawdry affair. I clenched my jaw, sickened but unsurprised by the details of Derek's revolting dalliance with that cheap office slut. Vince's eyes narrowed. But that's not the worst of it. I found some major financial discrepancies at CipherShield, too. Like what? I leaned forward, my anger simmering. Well, for starters, it seems like Derek has been shunting investor money into unauthorized accounts under his control, Vince began, scrolling through documents on his laptop. There's also questionable accounting regarding payroll expenditures and taxes. That lying, cheating bastard, I erupted, fire coursing through me. He used my salary from Terrasis to help fund that startup scam. The sheer breadth of Derek's deception knew no bounds. While I poured my life into my software engineering role to make ends meet, he had been squandering our money on illicit thrills and shady dealings. Just then, The doorbell rang. Vince reflexively tensed before rising to answer it. I heard muffled voices before Derek's unmistakable timbre boomed from the entryway. "Where the hell is my wife?" I froze as he barged into the living room, incredulous fury etched across his face. "What kind of twisted games are you playing at?" He advanced on me, remorseless entitlement radiating from his towering frame. "You've been avoiding me for weeks and hanging around with this loser? Everything I've done is to provide for our future." In one charged motion, Derek swatted the laptop off the coffee table, sending it clattering to the floor. "We're going home right now." Something inside me snapped at his show of dominance. Years of suppressed anguish and rage detonated in an explosive torrent. "How dare you!" I shot daggers at my soon-to-be ex-husband. "You've been cheating on me with that simpering whore Cassidy, blowing millions of dollars on your twisted fantasies while I worked myself to the bone." Derek's expression flashed from fury to fear as I unleashed the full, scorching brunt of my disgust. "We're through, Derek. I refuse to be married to such a deceitful, morally bankrupt cretin. The days of your lies and betrayal are over." His jaw went slack as I punctuated the tirade by violently whipping off my wedding band, clattering it against the wall. Derek recoiled, any trace of smug control evaporating from his bullying facade. "You're making a huge mistake, Emilia," he stammered, voice quivering. "Nobody will believe your insane accusations. I'll bury you with my wealth and influence if you try to ruin me." I matched his glare with seething determination. "I have no doubt your ludicrous spending and dodgy finances will bury you quite nicely without any help from me." With that, I stormed out, leaving a shell-shocked Derek gaping in the wake of his life's implosion. The first phase was complete. I'd irrevocably severed our ties and exposed his moral void, but this was merely the opening salvo. Derek's reckoning was long overdue, and I would be the catalyst to dismantle his life as he knew it, just as he had so brutally disassembled mine. In the days following my explosive confrontation with Derek, I felt an odd sense of calm amidst the swirling turmoil. I had shattered the facade of our sham marriage and reclaimed my dignity. Now it was time to pivot to the next phase, dismantling his life completely. Vince proved to be an invaluable ally, his ruthless efficiency in gathering intel matched only by his outrage at Derek's treachery. One evening, he arrived at my apartment looking grim. "I have the nail for Derek's coffin," he stated, dropping a weighty manila folder on my kitchen counter. "This is a logged record of every call, text, and email between him and his little mistress." I leafed through the documents, bile rising at the sheer volume of lurid communications. Explicit photos, arrived erotic messages, hotel reservations, all conclusive proof that Derek's affair had been raging for months under my oblivious nose. "There's more," Vince continued grimly. "It seems our dear husband wasn't quite as discreet in covering his financial tracks at Cipher Shield. He produced a raft of spreadsheets detailing transfers of investor funds to a shadowy shell corporation under Derek's control. The figures showed millions embezzled to furnish his depraved indulgences with Cassidy. "That low-life scumbag," I erupted, anger detonating through me like an inferno. "He jeopardized the entire startup to bankroll his fling?" Vince nodded solemnly. "Not just that. He flat-out lied to employees and investors about the company's financial standing to keep the grift going as long as possible." White-hot rage surged through my veins. I thought back to all the times Derek had manipulated and gaslit me about money issues, siphoning my hard-earned income to sustain his double life of unbridled deceit. That malignant, narcissistic predator? I seethed, trembling with revulsion. He robbed me of my dignity and self-worth for his selfish, criminal pursuits. Just then, there was an insistent knock at the door. Vince and I exchanged puzzled glances before I moved to answer it. I pulled open the door to a cold draft, and the last person I expected to see. "Derek, what the hell are you doing here?" I hissed through gritted teeth. My wretched ex-husband barged past me into the apartment, his expression one of desperation and panic. "We need to talk," he pleaded, eyes darting around wildly. "This has gone too far, Emilia. You have to stop this crusade before it's too late." "Too late for what?" I arched an eyebrow, adrenaline coursing at his audacity to ambush me. "Too late for you to escape the consequences of your craven betrayal and fraud?" Derek ran his fingers through his disheveled hair, sweat beading on his forehead. "Please, The evidence you've amassed, it could ruin me, destroy my entire life's work if it gets out. I allowed a bitter laugh to escape my lips. You mean the life's work of gaslit lying and cheating funded by other people's money? I'd say it's a ruination well-deserved, wouldn't you agree? Vince emerged from the kitchen, glaring daggers at the pathetic man before us. You've got a set of brass balls showing up here whimpering for mercy, he spat acidly. After you demolish this family's future without a second thought. To my satisfaction, Derek shrank back under the searing rebuke. The mask of his self-assured facade permanently shattered, leaving nothing but the craven coward who had irrevocably fractured my heart. I'll stop at nothing to make you atone for your trail of destruction, I stated coolly, fixing my treacherous ex-husband with an unflinching glare. Consider this the mere first flicker of the inferno I'm going to rain down upon your shattered, deceitful life. Derek's shoulders slumped in anguished defeat as the gravity of his impending ruination took hold. He opened his mouth to protest, then seemed to think better of it. With leaden steps he turned and trudged out the door into the wintry night, alone, exposed, and bracing for the oncoming storm of searing justice I was determined to unleash. Mere days after Derek's pathetic attempt to grovel for mercy, I steeled myself to confront him again. But this time, on my terms. I strode into the Cipher Shield offices, head held high, despite the startled gazes of employees who recognized me. The sleek modern space seemed to reek of Derek's duplicity. I marched straight past the front desk toward his corner office. "Ma'am, you can't go back there," a flustered receptionist called after me, but I kept moving with determination. Flinging open his door, I fixed my soon-to-be ex-husband with a look of pure disgust. Derek was slumped at his desk, haggard shadows under his eyes betraying his lack of sleep. "We need to talk. Now?" I stated flatly. Derek startled at my intrusion, quickly regaining his composure with an indignant scowl. "What are you doing here, causing a scene, Emilia?" "Don't play dumb," I shot back hotly. "We both know I have irrefutable proof of your reprehensible affair and shady dealings here." Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a ceramic mug adorned with the face of that vapid bimbo Cassidy. My blood boiled at the audacity. "Using company funds to indulge your twisted fantasies with your little office whore?" I swept my arm across his desk, sending the mug and various files clattering to the floor in a cascade of papers and ceramic shards. "How dare you!" Derek erupted, leaping to his feet and pounding his fist on the desk. "This is my company, and I'll spend the money how I wish." "Your company," I arched an eyebrow in contempt. "Or should I say, the company funded by investors and employees you've been ruthlessly duping for years to bankroll your pathetic infidelity." My words landed with sickening impact, Derek's feigned bravado crumbling. You have no proof," he stammered unconvincingly. Retrieving my phone, I pulled up the incriminating records Vince had gathered, the financial transfers, emails, travel logs of his rendezvous with Cassidy. I watched as each new dagger of evidence burrowed into Derek's facade. "Sure looks like proof of fraud and misappropriation to me," I stated coolly, holding the screen up for him to see the mountain of evidence. "I have more than enough to bury you unless you confess and resign immediately." Derek's chest heaved with impotent rage, knowing he was hopelessly cornered. Running his hands through his disheveled hair, panic crept across his features. You crazy bitch," he sputtered, spittle flying from his unhinged jaw. "Think anyone will believe your melodramatic hysterics over my reputation?" I fixed him with a look of pure, undisguised loathing. "The evidence speaks for itself, you immoral, gaslighting sociopath. I've played more than enough of your demented mind games." With a few taps, I sent the entire file repository to the Cipher Shield executive team and board of directors. Derek's phone instantly lit up with a flurry of alerts as his world began crashing down. "No," he croaked in disbelief, helplessly watching the reckoning unfold. "There's no escaping the truth this time," I stated with finality. "Nor the consequences of your compulsive lying and deception." In that moment, it became undeniably clear the facade had finally shattered. Gone was the smug narcissist, replaced by a sniveling, broken husk of a man. His chair squeaked as Derek collapsed back into it, seemingly deflating before my eyes. I turned on my heel and strode out, my disgust eclipsed by the grim satisfaction that justice had been decisively served. Still, deep down, I couldn't help feeling a lingering sense of gut-wrenching betrayal. The man I had loved, had built a life with, was nothing more than a mirage spun from greed and moral bankruptcy. But in the end, his greatest deception was the lie he had allowed me to believe, that the bind we once shared could ever be mended. For that, there would be no penance, no path to redemption. His downfall was complete and irrevocable, and I would emerge from the ashes, reborn and emboldened to forge a future free from the shackles of his depravity. In the aftermath of my explosive confrontation with Derek at Cypher Shield, the dominoes began to topple with ruthless momentum. Board members bombarded me with requests for details on the evidence against him. Investors screamed for answers about misappropriated funds. It was then that I knew I needed to bring in reinforcements. The situation had escalated beyond just exposing Derek's personal misdeeds. His entire empire was on the cusp of ruination. I turned to my loyal friend Sophia Larson, a brilliant corporate litigator I'd known since law school. If anyone could navigate the legal minefield ignited by Derek's malfeasance, it was her steely brilliance. "This is an absolute quagmire," Sophia muttered as she pored over the financial records and communication logs detailing Derek's affairs, both corporate and extramarital. She fixed me with an intense gaze. "Make no mistake, the evidence is damning. That snake husband of yours is looking at criminal fraud charges on multiple fronts along with termination." I nodded, adrenaline surging at the prospect of Derek facing maximum devastation for his transgressions. He deserves the book thrown at him. I want him to lose everything after how completely he betrayed me. "Oh, he will." Sophia's expression hardened. "We're going to systematically dismantle every shred of credibility and success he so arrogantly clung to. Facilitate a legal and PR bonfire that will incinerate Derek's reputation to ashes." Over the ensuing days, Sophia barraged Cypher Shield's board with a meticulous roadmap of Derek's deception and criminality. In tandem, she worked backdoor connections to funnel leaks about his indiscretions to media outlets. For his part, Derek remained outwardly defiant. He fought tooth and nail to shift blame and downplay the evidence. But legal proceedings were inexorably closing in, his corrupted legacy unraveling by the hour. I watched in perverse satisfaction as punishing headlines emblazoned Derek's face across publications. Tech moguls fall from grace amid sex scandal, and Cypher Shield CEO terminated, accused of fraud, embezzlement, became inescapable refrains. The evening the corporate axe officially fell, Vince and Sophia joined me at my apartment for a bottle of celebratory wine. We locked arms and cheered as footage of Derek being unceremoniously marched out of his offices by security flashed across the news. As the wine flowed, the catharsis truly sank in. My closest friends had stood resolute by my side in dismantling the once charmed life of my traitorous husband. We banded together, undaunted, to unleash the justice he deserved. "You did it, Em," Vince crowed, pulling me into a tight embrace. "The bastard got exactly what was coming to him." In those tender moments, a profound sense of renewal bloomed within me. The shackles of Derek's malfeasance no longer weighed me down. My tale of tragic betrayal had transmuted into one of triumphant rebirth, forged from the bonds of steadfast loyalty. I would never be a victim again. My friend's belief in me ignited a newfound inner fire, one that would blaze brightly, consuming any deceit that dared encroach upon the peace I had reclaimed. This was only the beginning. After the tsunami of humiliation Derek endured in the wake of his ouster from Cypher Shield, it felt cruelly fitting to deliver one final, crippling volley. A grand spectacle to raze any remaining remnants of his ruined reputation to the ground. Fate seemed to align when our city's annual Tech Hub conference rolled around a few weeks later. It was the perfect high-profile stage to showcase the true depths of his deceptions once and for all. Vince spearheaded the efforts, leveraging connections to ensure both Derek and his mistress Cassidy snapped up coveted invites. Salacious rumors had swirled in tech circles for weeks, so their presence ignited feverish anticipation. They took the bait, either oblivious to the firestorm brewing or too arrogantly defiant to heed the warning signs. On the night of the gala, I arrived through a discreet back entrance, carefully plotting my final ruinous gambit. Donning an elegant black gown, my appearance would be the calm before the storm. I took a fortifying breath as Vince and Sophia rendezvoused with me, sleek in their evening attire. It's go time. You both remember the plan? They nodded in grim acknowledgement, the gravity of this evening's events clear. This was about more than mere payback against Derek. It was about justice, irrefutable and blinding for all to bear witness. "Knock 'em dead, kiddo," Vince murmured with a reassuring squeeze of my arm. I slipped into the opulent grand ballroom, a hush falling over the crowd as I became visible. Derek stood near the stage, engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion with a petulant Cassidy. Even through his rumpled tuxedo, the weight of recent weeks had clearly exacted its toll. Striding to the center of the room, I felt hundreds of probing gazes scrutinizing my movements. Let them feast their eyes and minds for the reckoning to come. Tapping the microphone twice, I cleared my throat, the sound piercing through the tension like a thunderclap. "Excuse me, everyone. May I have your attention, please?" My voice rang with commanding authority, instantly silencing any lingering whispers. "My name is Emilia Archer. Many of you are likely familiar with the sordid allegations surrounding my husband, the disgraced Derek Archer, and his criminal fraud along with infidelity involving the woman beside him, Cassidy Wells." An audible murmuring rippled through the ballroom as I gestured to the pair, paralyzed like deer in headlights under the ever-intensifying spotlight. "Well, those rumors are all true, and then some," I pronounced with finality, holding up a tablet displaying the reams of incriminating documentation. "This degenerate knowingly embezzled millions from Cipher Shield, a firm founded on the labor and investments of this entire community, for his own crooked interests." The tension hung thick as onlookers absorbed the extent of my words. But perhaps even more repulsively, he financed a protracted, despicable affair with his colleague Cassidy by diverting those misappropriated funds to luxury hotel gifts and other salacious trysts. Jaws agape. The crowd drank in every damning detail. I fixed Derek with a searing glare as he feebly tried to protest, his mouth opening and closing in futile dismay. "So let this sordid saga serve as a righteous reckoning against the moral failings of greed, infidelity, and exploitation," I proclaimed with conviction. "This towering monument to decadence must implode under the weight of its own iniquities." As if on cue, Sophia initiated the video sequence assembled from the annexed files. Lurid photo evidence, salacious email exchanges, and incriminating financial statements flashing across the giant ballroom screens for all to absorb in unvarnished detail. A guttural cry of mortification rang out as Cassidy collapsed to her knees, clawing and grasping at whatever dignity she could salvage. Derek stood stupefied, transfixed by the carnage of his sickening misdeeds materializing before him. You're unhinged," he managed to sputter incredulously, veins protruding in his flushed face. "Still spinning lies to shield your inflated ego from accepting the truth?" I coolly retorted, stepping forward to meet my wretched adversary eye to eye. "That pathological tendency was your ultimate downfall." Derek faltered under my unrelenting gaze, shaking his head in vain denial. "Face it, Derek, you are a shattered, morally bankrupt disgrace of a human being, a vermin who exploited the trust and resources of everyone around you to satisfy your grotesque vices. You don't deserve a shred of redemption or dignity." He opened his mouth once more, a final merciful protestation no doubt waiting on his lips, but I'd allowed his poison more oxygen than it deserved already. "Your debt to society has finally come due," I stated with finality. "This is justice. Ugly, furious, yet utterly warranted justice. May its searing conviction blacken your name into irreversible infamy." With that, I turned on my heel and marched away, leaving Derek to wallow in the smoldering ruins of the life he had so ruthlessly disgraced through deception and indulgence, karma's reckoning complete. In the aftermath of my explosive unveiling at the Tech Hub Gala, Derek's life detonated in spectacular fashion. No sphere was left unscathed as the towering inferno of his sins raged. Within days, Cipher Shield's remaining investors launched a blistering lawsuit, citing racketeering, fraud, and embezzlement charges that could bankrupt Derek for decades. Corporate sponsors began falling like dominoes. Termination letters flooded in as news of his depraved conduct with Cassidy circulated. Any upstanding firm couldn't risk the stain of association. Several media outlets, salivating over the salacious scandal, unearthed further incriminating details. Testimonies from relatives and former employees painted a disturbing portrait of clinical narcissism and serial infidelities that called Derek's entire professional career into question. For my part, I opted out of the media circus, letting the uncontestable evidence dismantle his legacy of deceit. I spent evenings with Vince and Sophia, sharing bottles of bold Cabernet in solemn celebration of justice served. I still can't believe we pulled that off at the gala. Vince grinned one night, clinking his wine glass against mine. Did you see Derek's face when the videos started rolling? He looked like he'd been gut-punched by a freight train. And that sniveling shrew Cassidy, Sophia chimed in with a derisive scoff, served her right for betraying her entire gender to cozy up to that creep's ill-gotten riches. We shared a cathartic laugh at their expense. After the maelstrom of deception and pain, seeing the catalysts of betrayal suffer their just deserts was perversely uplifting. I had confronted the harsh realities of evil, emerged vindicated. However, the sweet, lingering reverberations of victory curdled one fateful evening a few weeks later. A familiar name flashed across my phone screen, Derek. I froze, my chest tightening with disbelieving dread. Part of me thought he'd slink permanently into exile after the humiliation. But of course, malignant denial seemed to course through his veins. I let the call go to voicemail as his desperate ramblings crackled from the speaker. Something about not being able to access accounts or funds, needing one last conversation to explain his side. I shook my head grimly, the audacity of his pleas stoking anger through my veins. How pathetically typical of him to beg for scraps after such scorched earth destruction. When another insistent call came through, I answered with fury blazing. What could you possibly want after everything you've put me through? Your staggering greed and depravity were enough to incinerate your entire life to ashes. I'm utterly ruined. Derek's voice trembled, a husk of his once arrogantly boastful tenor. The lawsuits, the investigations, I can't escape any of it. And whose moral bankruptcy dealt that fatal wound? I countered acidly, reveling in dismantling the remnants of his fragile ego. Did you think there would be no dire consequences for betraying me in such a horrific, protracted manner, for pillaging everyone around you to indulge your deviant appetites? I'm penniless, Emilia, Derek continued, a hollow plea creeping into his voice. I have nowhere to turn. Just give me a chance to explain. Please. Save your sniveling excuses, I seethed with finality. Any man possessing even an iota of a soul would not relentlessly trample on the sanctity of marriage and those he claimed to cherish. There was a pregnant pause as Derek registered the futility of redemption. You've made your wretched bed, I pronounced with conviction. Now lie in it and ruminate on the consequences of your corrosive greed and ego until your dying day. With that, I terminated the call, severing any lingering embers of remorse for my husband's self-immolated downfall. He was now an ashen husk in my mind, effectively excised from existence. It was over. Justice had been rendered in all its blistering glory. In the serene 2 years following my campaign of scorched earth defiance against Derek, I found unexpected solace in rebirth. Gone are the shackles of betrayal and emotional tumult, forsaken along with our sham marital vows the instant his trail of deceit unraveled. In their place now shines a renewed inner radiance, forged from the bonds of friendship that guided me through my bleakest suffering. When the smoke finally cleared and Derek's raging inferno of misdeeds smoldered to cinders, I turned inward. With Vince and Sophia's counsel, I devoted myself to intensive therapy, healing the deep scars inflicted by my depraved husband's utter lack of morality or remorse. For a time, deflecting bitter thoughts about the devastation he wrought proved agonizing. When waves of anger and trauma roiled, I medicated, seeking stillness through exercise, meditation, immersing myself in nature's soothing expanses. Slowly but surely, I rediscovered the fire of my own indomitable spirit that shattered Derek's web of lies. Days faded into months, then years. I savored each incremental reawakening of my confidence, passion, and purpose, unshackled from his lurid exploits and treachery. My stalwart career as a software engineer remained a bedrock through it all. I excelled on ambitious projects, mentored bright junior engineers, and fiercely protected my team's talent from toxic cultures of dishonest leaders. In turn, terraces shower me with new opportunities. raises, leadership roles, finally culminating in a director position managing cutting-edge cryptography initiatives. I redoubled my pursuits of creative stimulation as well. I relished adventures with Vince and Sophia, exotic vacations, theatrical shows, and other indulgences that awakened a renewed lust for experiencing the richness of life. On one such trip, hiking through the lush rainforests of Costa Rica, I found myself marveling at our resilient friendship. When embers of doubt crept into my psyche in those first turbulent months post-Derek, their belief in my brighter destiny never wavered. You know, it was your unwavering moral compass that ultimately saved all of us from falling prey to that snake, Vince reflected wistfully as we traversed the verdant jungle paths. If you hadn't been willing to go scorched earth, who knows how much more damage he could have inflicted. I contemplated those words, embracing their profound resonance. By exposing Derek's lecherous criminality, I hadn't merely claimed vengeance. I had redirected my life path away from that corrosive spiral of deception. That chapter of suffering while anguishing had transmuted into catalyzing events that forged me into a stronger, more self-assured woman. No longer would I meekly accept exploitation or cruelty at the hands of anyone, colleagues or lovers. I embraced uncompromising defiance as a protective reflex, a shield hardened by the purifying fires I'd stared down and conquered. Now, each new dawn delivering novel challenges and adventures exhilarates me with fresh possibility. What heights can I scale, if tempered by the lessons of betrayal's harsh tutelage? What bonds might I cultivate, untainted by doubts that strengthen my tenacity and uplift others from despair? These are the unanswered wonders beckoning me into the bright horizons shimmering ahead. A panorama free from the toxic specter of derailed dreams and despoiled trust that I once lamented under Derek. Now, only wispy embers of my former life still smolder, no longer possessing the vitality to sear me with anguish. They have dissipated to half-remembered phantoms, devoured by the radiant rising of my triumphant, remade identity. My name is Emilia. I am a survivor, rededicated to abundance and grace, and my journey soars ever onward without limitation.
I am Caroline. I'm 31 years old. I currently take care of our domestic chores while being at home. For the past 3 years, my spouse Jerry, 4 years my senior, and I have resided with his parents, Henry and Marilyn. Henry and Marilyn are both in their 60s and in good health. Jerry's mother Marilyn is quite outgoing and leads a busy social life. Despite not having a job outside the home, I have observed that Marilyn rarely helps out around the house since we moved in. She used to be a stay-at-home mother, but these days she mostly delegates household duties to me. Marilyn sometimes tells me to take time off, but when she comes back, she gets mad at me if things aren't perfect. I've made an effort to talk to her about this and let her know that I might not be able to finish everything before she departs, but she brushes off my worries. Frequently, she makes the comment that having a lot of duties to do is typical and berates my generation for not managing as effectively as hers did. Marilyn also constantly compliments Jerry, mentioning that she is proud of his work at a prestigious company in particular, and she also feels that even though Jerry puts in a lot of effort, I fall short. She now frequently comments on this comparison. Jerry's response is not helpful. When Marilyn bemoans my efforts during meals, all he does is answer with a detached, "Oh, really?" which conveys very little encouragement. When Jerry was younger, I respected him for his maturity. But these days, even when I work late into the night, I frequently feel like a housekeeper. The issue has gotten harder and harder, and I wish Jerry would defend me more. It seems like he doesn't realize how much I've contributed to our house. Instead of coming right up to me, he throws laundry at me, pointing at my face, and says curtly that I should take care of that too. Because of how much he has changed since our wedding, I regret getting married to him. He brought home a cake on our first anniversary, but he also laughed about it and playfully crushed a pie in my face. It's remarkable that he's an adult. But there is one bright spot in my life. Henry, my father-in-law. He always asks if I need help with anything and is quite peaceful. In this household, he is the only one who is friendly to me. Henry has grown to be a confidant since I quit my work to get married. He's become more and more special to me, and I now consider him to be a father figure. But Henry works throughout the day, so I find myself spending a lot of time by myself with Marilyn. I can talk to Henry as I like, but Marilyn becomes grumpy with me. Because Jerry ignores me, she even started accusing me of flirting with my father-in-law. She would toss these charges around while Henry was not around. I attempted to refute it, but she ignored me, sarcastically inquiring as to if she had offended anyone, always prepared with a scathing rejoinder. Our discussions appeared to get off topic at all. I brought these concerns up with Jerry, thinking he might realize they were nothing more than Marilyn's baseless fears. But he dismissed me with a joke about my newfound interest in older guys. It was glaringly obvious that nothing would shift. Not only did I not think he would start doing chores and stop making fun of Marilyn, but I also didn't think he would respond the way he did. I felt more and more uncomfortable in their house after such a big shock. Marilyn got talking one summer day about organizing a summer vacation trip for Jerry's family. Marilyn asked whether I wanted to go on a family trip, which surprised me because I had assumed it was just her usual enthusiasm for trips. I had assumed they might go without me. Therefore, I hadn't anticipated receiving an invitation. Marilyn saw me hesitate, or look doubtful, and asked whether I really wanted to go. Her unexpected invitation unsettled me. I was unsure of her motivation and concerned about her possible reaction if I said no. Jerry brought up the trip again that evening, asking if I was going to be attending. I was surprised by his response when I mentioned that I had been invited. He laughed heartily. I asked him why he thought it was hilarious, feeling even more uncomfortable and confused, but he waved my inquiry away, saying it was unimportant. Jerry was driving. Marilyn was sitting next to him, and I was in the back of the car on the day of the trip. Henry's professional duties kept him from joining us at first. My nervousness increased when I couldn't see their faces while we were driving. Marilyn asked me halfway through whether I had taken out any money for the vacation, and I said that I had, a total of a few hundred. Her happy expression struck me as odd. I realized we had driven past the inn where we were meant to stay as we carried on. Did we just pass the inn? I inquired. Jerry gave a hazy response, saying we would check in after viewing the tourist attraction ahead. I was filled with a sense of dread as his smile failed to reach his eyes. The longer we traveled, the more luscious and desolate the surroundings became. I sighed quietly, so that neither Marilyn nor Jerry would hear me worry. After a while we reached a tiny isolated dam with very few people there. Jerry reminded us not to leave anything precious in the car, and Marilyn advised us to come outside and stretch our legs. I did as they said and ventured out into the strange surroundings, still attempting to process the day's surprising turns of events. Jerry and Marilyn appeared to be hesitating as I got out of the car and closed the door, as though they were trying to adjust something inside. The sound of the locks engaging was then audible to me. With the windows barely cracked open, Jerry started giggling hysterically. Perplexed, I inquired, "What's happening? Do we intend to spend the night here?" A wave of rage for Marilyn passed, but I controlled myself. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying not to lose my temper. "You walked right into that one, didn't you?" Jerry replied, laughing so hard he had to clutch his stomach. My wallet and cell phone were still in the car. Everything had unfolded just as Marilyn and Jerry had planned. Have fun out here, Caroline. Marilyn sneered mockingly. Maybe you can eat some grass and sleep under the stars. Jerry, still holding my wallet, rifled through it and then rolled up the window. Their laughter faded as they drove off, leaving me stranded. Standing alone, feeling the heat, I muttered to myself, well, this is just great. Despite the sweltering heat and the risk of dehydration, I surprisingly didn't panic. About an hour later, I found myself in the lobby of the inn where we were originally supposed to stay. "Why are you here?" Jerry exclaimed, shocked to see me as he entered the lobby. "Are you a ghost? Did something happen at the dam?" He looked utterly bewildered. Marilyn, who looked like she was on the verge of fainting, eyed me nervously. I considered playing along and pretending to be a ghost just to tease them, but I decided against it. "I'm not a ghost, and I'm staying here tonight," I told them, showing them the key to my room where I had already dropped off my luggage. Jerry couldn't make sense of the situation and started to get agitated. He thought I had taken the key to their room without permission. "What are you doing? Give it back," he demanded, reaching for the key aggressively. However, I was prepared for their antics this time, and I stood my ground, ready to confront whatever came next. Just then, a man stepped forward and firmly grasped my husband's hand. "Sir, please refrain from causing a disturbance here," he said with authority. He was about the same age as Henry, but with a stronger build and taller stature, which made him appear more commanding than my middle-aged, slightly overweight husband. "Who are you? Are you staff here? You can't just interfere with a guest like this. I'll sue you for assault." Marilyn shouted at the man who intervened. "I apologize for not introducing myself earlier. I am the owner of this inn," the man replied calmly. Upon hearing this, my husband quickly released my hand. I recognized the owner. Back in my college days, I had visited this area with friends during a summer break. It was an extremely hot day, and we got lost on our way to our accommodation. During our ordeal, we stumbled upon a girl who collapsed on the side of the road, Kelly, the owner's daughter. We immediately called for an ambulance and stayed with her until help arrived. The next day, the owner visited us at the inn where we were staying and thanked us profusely. "You saved my daughter's life. Thank you so much," he had said. He also extended an invitation. "Next time you're in the area, please stay with us. You won't have to pay." Since then, my family and I have visited the inn several times, so I knew the owner quite well. As he addressed my husband and Marilyn, he remained polite, yet I could sense the undercurrent of anger in his demeanor. In fact, both the owner and I were aware of Marilyn and my husband's scheme from the beginning. 3 weeks ago, feeling suspicious about their sudden invitation for a trip, I decided to set up a voice recorder in the living room. I strategically placed it to capture conversations when my husband and Marilyn thought they were alone, like when I was taking a bath or doing laundry. When I stumbled upon their plan, it was utterly shocking. I heard my husband and Marilyn plotting over a recorded conversation. "Let's ditch Caroline somewhere. It would be hilarious. How about near that dam an hour's drive from the inn?" Realizing the gravity of their scheme, I immediately contacted the owner of the inn to inform him about what was unfolding. The owner was livid upon hearing this, having once experienced his daughter collapsing in the heat. He felt a personal connection to my predicament and was even more perturbed by their callousness. With the situation clear to him, he meticulously arranged my pickup for today, just after my husband and Marilyn's car had departed. Interestingly, the driver of the inn's shuttle turned out to be Kelly, the very girl we had helped years ago. I got my license. Let's go for a drive," she exclaimed with excitement. Despite my initial surprise, I agreed, and we chatted happily, even stopping to buy some local specialty ice cream on the way back to the inn. Even though I knew about the plan and that a pickup was coming, I was still worried. But Kelly, knowing the area exceptionally well, expertly navigated, and we arrived at the inn significantly before my husband and Marilyn. "You mentioned suing earlier, ma'am," the inn owner said, addressing Marilyn with a stern look. "Yes, I did. It's outrageous to be accused of the opposite." Marilyn snapped back defiantly. "I'm sorry, but you're not our guest," the owner responded firmly. "What? Don't mess with us." My husband and Marilyn both lost their tempers simultaneously. "Your reservations have been canceled," the owner stated plainly. "And who do you think you are?" My husband blustered, on the verge of another outburst. The owner held him back. "Caroline did nothing wrong. We at the inn canceled your reservations," the owner explained calmly. "What do you mean?" my husband demanded. "If you leave a woman alone at a dam in the mountains after stealing her wallet, wouldn't you be committing a crime?" The owner posed rhetorically, emphasizing the gravity of their actions. "We cannot permit such behavior at our inn," he declared, and revealed that he had already called the police. My husband and Marilyn became even more incensed at this revelation. "This is no joke. You can't treat us this way. I work for a respected company," my husband protested, as if his job should afford him special treatment at this quaint mountain inn. Just then, Henry arrived, immediately sensing the tension. "Hey, what's going on here?" he asked, surveying the scene. Marilyn and my husband quickly tried to spin the story, accusing the inn staff of rudeness and claiming they wanted to stay elsewhere. However, when Henry was briefed on the actual events, he became enraged, a side of him I'd never seen before. "You idiots!" he yelled, clearly embarrassed. "I can't believe we're from the same family. You two, get out of here now." My husband and mother-in-law were stunned by Henry's outburst. "Where to? Another inn?" they asked, bewildered. But Henry was resolute. "You're disowned. Get out." "No, don't make me say it again," he commanded, pushing my husband away. As the police arrived, my husband and Marilyn's complexions turned ashen. The owner and I explained the entire scenario to the officer, and I played back the recorded conversation. My husband and Marilyn began to cry, but Henry interjected sharply. "Quiet down. You're disturbing the inn. Officer, please take them away." "It's not like that, officer. We didn't think it would be such a big deal. It was just a prank," my husband tried to explain, but the officer's expression hardened. "A prank? Are you serious? Don't you realize that your little joke could have put someone's life at risk, especially your own wife's?" They were scolded harshly, though they weren't arrested due to the familial nature of the matter. Marilyn and my husband looked pale throughout the ordeal. "This isn't over. Caroline's feelings will determine your future, understand." With those final words, they left, still visibly shaken. Henry, who seemed apologetic for not intervening sooner, stayed behind to ensure everything was settled. Henry repeatedly expressed his remorse. "I'm sorry. I can't apologize enough for not noticing the unpleasant experiences you've been having and the terrible ordeal you went through today." He also extended a deep apology to the inn owner for the trouble caused by his family's actions. Interestingly, it turned out that the inn owner, who also runs several other businesses, is a client of the company where Henry works. Unaware of this connection, My husband had earlier boasted about his position at a prominent company, adding another layer of embarrassment to the situation. I was relieved that I had uncovered my husband and Marilyn's plan in time. But it was also a sobering reminder of what might have happened if I hadn't been vigilant. I hoped that being reprimanded by the police would help them realize the gravity of their actions. I decided to file for divorce from my husband after we got back from the inn, and I asked for a sizable settlement, thinking that this would teach them not to injure anyone else. Unexpectedly, Henry and Marilyn also ended up getting divorced. After the incident, Henry broke off all contact with my ex-husband and threw him out of the house. In addition, my ex-husband received advice to quit his position. His actions at work had also been troubling for a while. He had been unkind to his engineers and co-workers in the same way that he had handled me, and the HR department was already considering taking legal action against him. As I thought back on what I had done, I was disappointed to see that I had somewhat emulated such bad behavior. My ex-husband was unemployed now and had difficulty finding work. Even at his advanced age, he had no experience in management at his prior employer, thus he had trouble justifying his move. Marilyn was also expelled by Henry and went to live with family before going back to her parents' house. These events signaled a dramatic change in the course of events, emphasizing the fallout from their deeds and the value of integrity in both personal and professional spheres. Marilyn's tendency towards spending and traveling continues to raise concerns. If she were to move in with them, her relatives fear she would spend all of their savings. Since her health is still sound, it might be wise for her to think about getting a part-time work so she can support herself and allay these worries. I currently live independently close to my in-laws after moving out of their home. Henry and I are friends, and sometimes I ask him for guidance on work-related matters. I'm starting a new chapter in my life by accepting new professional chances instead of continuing in my prior function as a caregiver for the family and manager of domestic chore. A business owner who knew of my recent struggles contacted me during my employment search. He offered me a job at his company and showed care. He was ready to assist me in establishing a solid foundation within his company. Feeling touched by "Greetings, my maid." This is the first thing she says, even though she is aware that I am meeting with the intention of proposing marriage. I emitted a bewildered noise, supposing I must have misheard. "Oh, you're not the maid. You have such a poor-looking face," says Olivia, my future mother-in-law, giving me a sour smile. Scott, my fiancé who I believed to be on my side, horribly deceived me. He gave my face a quick glance before laughing heartily. "You're right, her face does not look good. I wish I could see her parents." Olivia continued, "Honestly, I wonder whether your parents would pass out from amazement at seeing a house as wealthy as ours." Olivia and Scott continued to belittle me and even teased my parents. When they weren't looking, I sent my father a message because I could take it no longer. He swiftly replied that he would be there immediately. I decided to get some fresh air because I could no longer take Scott's comments. Refrain from fleeing. As I walked out to wait for my father to arrive, I could hear Scott's crude laughter. I presented Scott and his mother to my father, Richard, 15 minutes later. Scott said, "This is the father of the slave." His eyes were not smiling, but his speech was composed. "Parent, hold on," Olivia said, recognizing my father and becoming pale in the process. "I'm Kelly, a 31-year-old employee at a small business. I've made it my life's work to blend in. I like wearing blue or black clothing and normally wear just foundation because of this. Because of my high prescription, I wear thick glasses instead of contacts. My low-key demeanor stems from my father's prominent career, which has shaped me since I was a young child. As an actor, my father enjoyed considerable popularity in the past and was frequently encircled by women while strolling around the town. Despite typically playing minor parts, he is nevertheless rather well known and frequently appears on television. My father made middle school difficult. His parents wanted their children to meet him, and classmates would beg for his autograph. I was frequently chastised for turning down all of these requests. They must have thought I was harsh to them, and I even had to deal with jealous students bullying me. I detested the thought of bragging, and I didn't want to bother my loving father. I went to a high school where no one knew me and dressed casually while struggling with these feelings. Fortunately, my last name was common, so I could carry on with my life as usual. I was able to have a carefree student life because men avoided approaching me due to my unassuming appearance. My greatest memories are of spending time with my female friends, having comic book conversations. It was after I started working that I met Scott, my fiancé. Scott was employed by the business that rented the copier machines to my workplace. At first, I didn't say much to him. Every time Scott stopped by to see how the copy machine was doing, we would have a little conversation. When the copy machine broke one day, it drastically altered our relationship. The machine broke down while I was busy getting ready for a meeting the following day, and I became really anxious. I called Scott because I needed it in order to prepare the documents. He arrived swiftly and examined the device. "Is there a way to fix it?" Worried, I asked him. With a smile, he continued, "I'll take care of it. Don't worry." That smile of Scott's made me fall in love. We were able to have the papers ready for the meeting, even though Scott had to arrange for a substitute because the copy machine could not be fixed. I tried to get closer to Scott after falling in love with him. I phoned him frequently after requesting his contact details. After that, I told Scott how I felt, and we began dating. Scott was consistently very thoughtful and helpful. He had never seemed angry to me. I assumed that even after finding out about my father, he would still be nice. I confidently proposed to Scott after we had been dating for 2 months, and he gladly accepted. I was ecstatic back then. One thing, though, concerned me: the way I looked. Even on dates, I had always worn big spectacles and dressed simply. It was a difficult habit to break. The actual me had clear features and resembled my father exactly. I had been rejected by boys for my attractiveness in middle school and had received invitations from other girls because of it. Even though it was difficult, I believed that Scott would understand. I wanted to gradually modify how I looked for the man I loved. Nevertheless, I began to feel uneasy after Scott proposed to me. Scott seemed nice before we were engaged, but lately, he started saying things that upset me. Scott proposed that we visit a bridal fair the other day to select our wedding location. He took me to this opulent location, a stunning guest house fit for an extravagant wedding with more than 200 guests. When I saw that, I was perplexed. I didn't want to stick out because I don't have many schoolmates. It was the little ceremony and small setting that I had hoped for. I didn't bring it up because Scott looked to be enjoying himself, and I didn't want to leave straight away. Scott was really happy when we went to a cafe after it was over. "Wasn't the wedding location we saw earlier lovely? I want something even more lavish," he remarked, sipping his coffee. I chose to tell Scott what I wanted since I was nervous. I thought it would be wonderful to have a quiet wedding for just the two of us. I figured kind Scott would get that I don't like to stick out too much. But the real world was much different. Scott gave me a snide look and laughed. "You wouldn't belong in a setting like that, you simple girl. Most likely, No outfit will look well on you with your heavy glasses. The comment made by Scott stunned me. I questioned, isn't a wedding about both families? He went added, not having a big wedding would be embarrassing because my family is wealthy. I was unable to speak. The once kind Scott seemed to be a different person, as though he was now gazing down on me. His attitude hurt me a great deal. Even worse, Scott said something that really confused me. You should just keep quiet and do as I say. A plain woman like you should be grateful to get married at all, he added, glancing at me gravely. I was astonished and even intimidated by his nasty statements. Scott then grinned and added, I'll make all the decisions, so all you have to do is follow my instructions, okay? I merely gave an uncomfortable smile because I had no idea how to reply. It was too late to act as though becoming engaged to Scott had never happened. I had already announced our engagement to my employer and our parents. I still adore Scott in spite of everything. I wished he would return to his previous kind self before we became engaged. Therefore, even though I was perplexed by Scott's adjustments, I felt compelled to carry on with the engagement. Scott continued to say things that bothered me, and every time he did, my heart grew more wounded. However, I was unable to harbor hatred for him. I was reminded of the nice Scott I used to know, even in moments when I considered ending things. I persisted in the relationship despite my confusion because I still loved him. Then something happened one day that made me even more perplexed. That was the day Scott and I decided on the location of our wedding. Scott made his selection from the opulent guest house we first saw after seeing a few others. A lavish ceremony really suits me, he remarked, beaming. That's too bad for you, unfortunately. Scott's laughter stung me. To sign the documentation, we proceeded to the guest house. I noticed someone unexpected on the way. Oh, Scott, is that you? She was the one. With a startled expression, Scott questioned, Mom, why are you here? Then he gave us an introduction. Olivia, this is my mother, Kelly. This is my fiancé, Kelly, Mom. Remember how I told you I was getting married? Olivia greeted me with a smile and said, I'm Scott's mother. You seem like a serious woman. Where do you work? You must be working at a big company, right? This was my first time meeting Scott's mother. I nervously told her about my company and that I do clerical work. Olivia made a puzzled face and said, I've never heard of that company. Scott then joined our conversation and said, Kelly's company is one of my clients. It's a small company with about 20 employees, so it's natural you haven't heard of it. After hearing Scott's explanation, Olivia's face turned grim. I thought since you were Scott's fiancé, you'd be working at a more reputable company. Doesn't that mean your salary is low? Are you planning to make Scott suffer? Olivia's words caught me off guard. I felt embarrassed and quickly said, I'm sorry, my salary isn't very high at my current job. I had no choice but to apologize to Olivia. She sighed heavily and said, Can you at least not rely entirely on Scott? Our family is from a distinguished background. We don't need a woman with a questionable background. I didn't know how to respond to her harsh words. Olivia continued, What about your parents? They work at reputable companies, right? She glared at me with narrow eyes. My father is. I started to answer, but then I noticed something familiar in her bag and stopped talking. Seeing my confusion, Scott spoke up. Come on, Mom, calm down. We're going to visit the house and make our marriage introductions soon, all right? Olivia didn't look happy and glared at me with a sour expression. It was clear that my first impression on her was terrible. The path to marriage seemed difficult, and I sighed quietly. Then came the day of the marriage introduction. Wow, I muttered as I stood in front of Scott's family home. It was far beyond anything I had imagined. Olivia had mentioned that their family was distinguished, so I expected them to be wealthy, but the reality was astonishing. The gate was automatic, there was an elevator inside, and there were even 10 luxury cars parked outside. They must be my future father-in-law's hobbies, I thought. Scott then said to me, "Dad is out for work today. It's just Mom, so make yourself comfortable." With a smile, I felt even more nervous. Olivia had been so harsh to me last time, and I feared she would make more sarcastic remarks. Scott and I entered the living room, where Olivia was waiting. "Hello, thank you for the other day," I greeted her politely. The next moment, Olivia said something unbelievable. "Welcome, my maid." Even though she knew I was here for a marriage introduction, this was the first thing she said. "What?" I let out a confused sound, thinking I must have heard wrong. Olivia looked at me with a mean smile and said, "Oh, you weren't the maid. You've got such a poor-looking face." I couldn't believe she said something so awful. Then Olivia laughed, clearly enjoying herself, and said, "Scott told me it's okay to treat you like a maid. Too bad for you." "What do you mean?" I asked, feeling pale and hoping it was a bad joke. I wanted to believe it wasn't true, but the fiancé I thought was on my side betrayed me in the worst way. Scott glanced at my face and burst out laughing. "You're right. She does have a poor-looking face. I'd love to see her parents. Maybe we could use them as our servants too," he said, laughing crudely. "Indeed," Olivia added. "Having someone obedient for free is quite nice, but if they come to a rich house like ours, I wonder if Kelly's parents would faint from shock." Olivia and Scott kept looking down on me. Olivia asked with a laugh, "By the way, what does your father do? He's not homeless, is he?" Scott burst into laughter and replied, "Mom, that's not a job. Given how Kelly is, he probably doesn't have a stable job." Ah, this is making my stomach hurt from laughing. Scott and Olivia continued to mock my parents, assuming my family was poorly educated and must have a plain appearance. I gritted my teeth in frustration, unable to bear their rude comments. They even looked down on my parents. I couldn't take it anymore and sent a message to my father while Olivia and Scott weren't looking. "I need you to come now." I wrote and also sent him the address of Scott's family home, which Scott had sent me for today's marriage introduction. I remembered it was my father's day off, so he must be relaxing at home. Luckily, my father replied within a minute saying, "I'm on my way." Feeling relieved, I told Scott and Olivia, "I'm feeling a bit unwell, so I'm going to get some fresh air." I couldn't stand listening to Scott and his remarks any longer. I thought I would wait outside quietly until my father arrived. "Oh, is that so? Well then, Scott, why don't we continue our tea leisurely?" Olivia said, pleased to be alone with Scott. "Kelly, don't you run away," Scott added, his crude laughter echoing as I left. I left my seat and waited outside for my father to arrive. 10 minutes later, he showed up wearing dark sunglasses. "Kelly, what's wrong? Today was supposed to be your marriage introduction, right?" he asked, looking puzzled. Seeing my father, I felt relieved and started to cry, even though I tried hard to hold back the tears. "What's wrong, Kelly?" my father asked, now worried. I explained everything to him, how Scott's attitude changed after we got engaged, and how Olivia joined in looking down on me. "I can't forgive them for treating you like that," he said. My father listened quietly, but was clearly angry. I told him more about what Olivia had said, and my father laughed. He took off his sunglasses and handed them to me. "We're going in now. I'll make sure they regret hurting you," he said firmly. With my father's support, I made up my mind. My love for Scott had faded, replaced by anger. "We'll make Scott and his mom regret it," I thought as I put on my father's sunglasses. Together, we entered Scott's family home. I stood in front of Scott and Olivia with my father by my side. "Sorry to keep you waiting," I said, standing tall. Olivia, who had initially laughed at me, became stunned when she saw the man beside me. I realized people freeze when they are too surprised. Olivia must have thought she could say something terrible again when I returned, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it this time. I planned to make her pay for her behavior. Olivia already recognized who my father was. "My father is the maid's father," I said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were stern. His handsome face made him look even more imposing. Olivia, who recognized my father, was shocked. "How could this be? Why is Richard here? Is this some kind of joke?" she asked, her cheeks turning red and her eyes sparkling like a young girl's. Scott stood there, clueless and stunned. My father didn't answer Olivia's questions, but kept staring at her and Scott. Olivia blushed under his gaze, which was quite embarrassing for a woman of her age. I looked at Olivia with a cold stare. Scott, now regaining his composure, asked in confusion, "Richard? Mom, is he a friend of yours?" Scott probably didn't know about my father. He's quite well known among Olivia's generation, but younger people might not recognize him unless they watch TV dramas. Olivia glared at Scott. "Scott, how rude of you. This man is a famous actor and my first love." Scott looked shocked and confused. Then Olivia turned to my father, smiling and speaking to him. "I'm a big fan of yours, Richard. See? Look at this," she said, pulling out her purse to show my father a keychain that only fan club members can buy. "I've been a fan for over 22 years, she added, expressing her admiration. "Mom." Scott seemed appalled by Olivia's sudden change in behavior. Olivia continued talking to my father, clearly thrilled to see her favorite actor. However, my father's gaze on Olivia was stern. After remaining silent, my father finally spoke up. "I am aware that you are one of my fans. Did you, however, attempt to treat Kelly, my beloved daughter, like a maid?" Olivia, who had been so animated, turned pale and froze at my father's comments. She began to shake. Dad ignored her and went on. "And without even getting to know me, you assumed I was homeless. That's really impolite of you." Olivia became alarmed as my father gave her a stern look. "No, I was unaware that you were Kelly's father. It's a pleasure to have you join the family, don't you think?" Olivia cried out to Scott in desperation, looking to him for comfort. "Yes, of course," Scott answered, obviously giving in to Olivia's pressure. Olivia attempted to defend herself to my father by stating, "I would have behaved more politely if I had known. I apologize. My previous remarks were motivated by jealousy. I feared that I would lose my son." I was astounded by Olivia's words. Now that she understood who my father was, she was trying to shift the tone with which she had been seeing me and my father. "Kelly is a wonderful woman who resembles Richard," she exclaimed. Observing their exchange, I reasoned that I couldn't allow my father to experience any more distress. I should be the one to bring this up with Olivia. It is my problem. I then broke the news to her. "I'm divorcing Scott. You and my dad will never become family." "How come?" "Kelly, Please think again. This is my opportunity to grow old with Richard, Olivia stated, becoming nearly emotional. Her weeping face was untrustworthy despite everything she had done to me. Olivia felt she could persuade me, even if I gave her a chilly look. She grinned as she saw my silence and remarked, "You want to marry Scott, don't you? I will no longer object to it. It's all right. I'll go above and above for you." Olivia had completely changed from her previous attitude. Now, she was willing to do anything and was yearning to become a member of my father's family. I was mocked by Olivia's abrupt reversal of opinion. I said, "No, thank you," quietly. "How come? How did you say that?" Olivia pretended not to hear me as she tipped her head. I yelled, "I absolutely do not want to become family with you," louder this time. Olivia looked surprised at my outburst. "You made crude remarks about my job and spoke terribly about my father," I addressed her. "That is something I will never be able to forgive." I made my position known. Olivia turned to face my father and grinned as she said, "Callie says this, but Richard, you want your daughter to be happy, right?" Olivia realized she couldn't convince me. We have a prosperous family, so she will be content with us. I don't believe that wealth makes people happy. Other people do. My father told Olivia, "Callie values love over money," knowing how I felt. In addition, our family is well off. As an actress, I make a respectable living. Olivia struggled to find words. It was expected. My father is a well-known actor who frequently stars in dramas and never has financial difficulties. Our family is wealthy, therefore there's no reason for me to get married for financial gain. Olivia went mute, unable to think of anything worth arguing. My father went on, "You say you're one of my fans, but I hate anyone who treats my beautiful daughter badly. Would you perhaps stop referring to yourself as a fan?" My father gave Olivia a frown when he said this. "I won't be able to live if Richard hates me," she exclaimed, breaking down in tears. Olivia broke down in tears. Scott, who'd remained quiet up until now, started talking. "Kelly, you've shown a lot of bravery. If you call it quits on our engagement, you'll regret it." He laughed. "Nobody will want someone like you." "Hold on a second." Concerned at my father's response, Olivia attempted to stop him, but Scott persisted. "I assumed you would be submissive, so I picked a simple woman like you. After we get married, I'm going to cheat on you with other attractive women." It seemed clear to me that I had made the right choice after hearing Scott discuss such topics. I slowly concluded that all Scott had desired was a woman who would submit to him. He had never loved me. My feelings for Scott had long since soured. As I was thinking this, Scott continued to talk about himself. My dad clenched his jaw, appearing as though he would seize Scott at any second. It felt like my time to strike back. "Dad, please wait." I halted my dad. I smiled, making sure my sunglasses stayed on. "What's going on?" My composed smile took Scott by surprise. "Is this still simple?" With a flourish, I removed the sunglasses and asked. Scott stared at my face with shock. I had cried when I saw my father and then put on makeup. I usually just wear foundation, but today I was wearing mascara, eyeliner, and eyeshadow. My appearance had changed drastically with just a little eye makeup. "Kelly, is that really you?" Scott blushed a little bit. It appeared that my cosmetics had me spellbound. "Yes, that is me. I've always tried to hide my appearance in order to blend in, but I've made the decision to stop," I remarked. "Because of my father's reputation, I had up until now tried to blend in as much as possible, but after being made fun of by Scott and Olivia, I realized it was acceptable to stand out and be myself. "I would have been nice to you if you had been like this from the beginning," exclaimed Scott, blushing. "We have time to start fresh. Come on, let's re-engage and use your father to introduce me to some stunning actresses." Who would carry on the engagement at this point, particularly with the audacity to request actress introductions? I told Scott exactly where I stood. The relationship is ended. I no longer require someone similar to you. I'll also call off the wedding location. What? Although Scott was in disbelief, I wasn't going to give up lightly. "Of course, you will be responsible for paying the wedding venue's cancellation charge." "That's only just," I went on. Olivia cried out, bewildered. "Wait a minute. It's too much to pay for in full." Scott appeared confused and unable to think of a reply. "Why not have Scott's father cover it?" My father then said. "It shouldn't be an issue with all those fancy automobiles, right?" With a revitalizing smile, my father said this. I used my strongest suit. "We can file a lawsuit if this doesn't satisfy you." Recall that my father is a well-known actor, and word of this could incite his ardent supporters to take revenge. My father has a large and devoted following. After making disparaging remarks about my father, detractors received horrific threats, including letters and prank calls with knives. It even made the headlines because it was that horrible. Olivia paled as she thought back to that experience. "Scott, you must cover all the cancellation fees," she hurriedly pleaded with him. "We have no idea what could occur." Olivia's worry made Scott realize, at last, how serious the situation was. "Are you serious?" Deflated, Scott went to his knees. "You are not necessary in my life," I continued, disregarding Scott and Olivia, who were looking sad. "Dad, let's head home." My father and I departed. Now that their engagement was terminated, Scott was required to cover the whole cost of the wedding venue's cancellation. It turns out that my father had once starred in a commercial for the company that Scott's father is the head of. My father told Scott's father what had transpired because of this link. Scott's father was incensed, not knowing what was going on. He angrily confronted Scott and Olivia, insisting that Scott pay for the entire cost of the postponed wedding. Scott was consequently left with a heavy financial load. Olivia was also impacted by the outcome. Her father, Scott, started the divorce process. Although how they treated us was a problem, it wasn't the main one. Olivia reportedly had a penchant of squandering money, as seen by the amount she spent on fan events for my dad. Scott's father, who had already run out of patience with her, provided the funds. In addition, my father disclosed that Olivia had written him improper love letters that included phrases like, "I want to divorce and marry you." My present husband, Richard, is nothing more than a cash cow. This infuriated Scott's dad. With the assistance of attorneys, the divorce was finalized against Olivia's objections. I'd heard whispers that Olivia was crying all the time and that this wasn't meant to happen. She had also been kicked from of my father's fan club due to her disruptive ways. Most likely, it was inevitable. Olivia lost everything. Therefore, I find it hard to believe that she might ever find happiness. She got what she deserved. Unexpectedly, Scott was taken into custody 8 months later. He was unable to forget me. That day, I removed my sunglasses, and Scott began to regularly appear in front of my house. He contacted me frequently, sobbing on the phone and pleading with me to call off our engagement, even after I quit my work. He would say, "I need you. No one else will do." All he cared about was how I looked. Scott sobbed and clutched his phone, but he was probably just curious about how I looked. My appearance before and after cosmetics had a noticeable difference. I don't need a man who is purely superficial. I gently declined, and then put a stop to his calls. But Scott started acting more ferociously. I visited the police multiple times, and on occasion I even received threats of harm. My father supported my choice to submit a police report, which I did after giving it a lot of thought. Scott was ultimately taken into custody for attempting to break into our home. It appears that Scott lost his employment following his incarceration. All Scott will likely have left is a mountain of debt. He will likely no longer be able to support himself. It's the result of having such a low opinion of people. I've been managing my father's business ever since. Compared to my prior clerical employment, this position is significantly more hard. I meet guests, arrange my father's schedule, go with him to sites, and bargain over pay. I used to primarily work on the computer, talk to a small number of people at the office, and commute between the company and my house. Meeting and chatting with individuals has now become a major aspect of my work. Though it's a significant departure from the past, I really appreciate it. Although managing is a glamorous job, my role involves more than that. I help my father in the background so he can concentrate on his acting career. Because to the erratic work schedule, you must be flexible. Above all, it's a career that allows me to help my father out intimately. I wish to make up for all the anxiety I have brought upon him. I only recently started this job, so there will undoubtedly be many obstacles, but I want to keep going and give it my all in support of my dear father. I am going to keep doing my hardest today. "Come on, get the coffee already," she exclaimed, her voice full of eagerness. My sister-in-law smirked and remarked, "This is why people who drop out and are even good-looking are just terrible at their jobs as housekeepers." I was going to respond to her hurtful remarks when something unexpected occurred. Her fiancé was standing close by when I recognized him, and as soon as I looked up, there was an unexpected hug. I wasn't sure what was going on because it came as such a surprise, but that hug made all the difference. It seemed as though my sister-in-law and I had suddenly switched places. "Hello, my name is Lauren, and I'm 37 years old. Watching footage of my kids' dancing performances while nodding off is one of my favorite pastimes. My baby is the greatest, a true angel. It's the prettiest thing ever, the way their little limbs and pretty little butt move when they dance. I enjoy spoiling my child because parents always think their child is more precious than anyone else's. Upon more reflection, it's possible that this is also how my sister-in-law, Lily, was raised. Let's travel back a few years to a time when I had recently tied the knot. My husband Jack stated that he wanted us to live with his parents once we were married when he proposed. Though the idea made me uneasy, I consented. Many believe it doesn't work out well to move in with my in-laws, Frank and Olivia, in their duplex. I was surprised, though, to find Frank and Olivia to be really kind, which made me feel comfortable. Satisfied, I was glad to move forward with the wedding arrangements. However, the good times didn't last forever. Things with my in-laws appeared good at first, but Lily started to cause problems. I went to Jack's parents' house to talk about the specifics of the wedding and to register. "Jack, you've got yourself a pretty bride," said a visiting relative of Jack's at the time. Though I was flattered, I also observed Lily's icy gaze gazing at me. "Jack's lucky to have such a beauty," cheerfully replied Jack's father, Frank. However, upon a second glance, I believed I caught Lily scowling at Frank as well. I dismissed it at first, supposing I was merely hallucinating, and soon forgot about it. But something odd occurred the day of the wedding. Lily appeared in a white outfit. She was clearly not an ignorant student who didn't know the fundamentals of wedding etiquette. She was in her late 30s. She purposefully selected a color that contrasted with my wedding gown. Jack and my in-laws were astonished, of course, and questioned, "What were you thinking?" However, her response was only, "This was all I had." My in-laws claimed that Lily changed into the white dress on her way to the wedding, having left the house in a different colored garment. The act of secretly changing clothes in a sneaky manner can only be interpreted as malevolent. She even made a crude remark about my wedding dress, claiming that it looked more like a $250 cheap dress on Lauren, which made the situation worse. It must depend on who was dressed elegantly, I suppose. Then she simply turned to leave. I found it incomprehensible that she would do anything so damaging. Following the wedding ceremony the following day, Lily's demeanor drastically changed. She abruptly stopped me in the middle of my tasks and said, "Hey, don't wash my laundry with yours." I was merely attempting to assist Olivia, my mother-in-law, by taking up her housekeeping duties. However, Lily took offense that I had washed her clothes in addition to mine. "Washing my clothes with a plain Jane's clothes might make me plain too," the woman remarked. "Vile. Clean them one more." Then, before she left the room, she flung the laundry at me. You might think that I would have responded, but I was in such shock that I was at a loss for words. That's not how adults speak, is it? Sorting clothes by color to prevent plainness from spreading. Not from an adult lady, but rather from a teenage girl who is just beginning to gain independence. That's the kind of thing you'd expect. I pretended to rewash the garments but really just put them back in her closet to save trouble. Olivia even expressed her apology for Lily's actions and claimed it was all right. But Lily was unrelenting after that day. True, I only completed my greatest degree of education because I left school early to pursue a desire. However, I've never had a problem with it, and I don't feel bad about it. Experiencing trivialization due to my education was awful. Lily, however, received her degree from a nearby national college. She acts as though she is more elite than me despite the fact that it's not a prestigious university. In fact, she began to declare, "I'm an elite, unlike you." However, Lily wasn't always this way. I was at a loss as to what had caused her such distress. We held a get-together with family a few months following the wedding. They'd all met at the wedding, but here was a more laid-back gathering where they could talk to Jack and me. It was a bustling mood, and before long our wedding was discussed. One of the relatives said, "Jennifer's wedding dress was so cute." Definitely. Jack is fortunate to have a woman of her caliber. I'm eager to see what their children will look like, a second person said, obviously looking forward to our shared future. Not to boast, but I've always felt good about the way I look. Although Jack may not be very attractive, his balanced face and endearing aura help him become well-liked by others. I saw Lily becoming irritated as the family talked, engrossed in their own chatter and compliments. "You all might not know, but I was really popular in my school days," she blurted out of nowhere. That's when I finally understood. I knew what was really driving Lily crazy. Lily began boasting in front of the shocked looks on everyone else's faces about how popular she was at school and how guys would come flocking to her any time she went down the street. To be honest, that sounded ridiculous, especially in light of Lily. Lily isn't what you would consider conventionally gorgeous, to be honest. Her big round nose and small eyes made it difficult to accept the stories she was telling. With doubtful expressions on their faces, everyone listened for a while before losing interest and swiftly shifting the topic. Out of sympathy, I listened on, although it was difficult to pay attention when you could tell it was all made up. Later, Lily followed me into the kitchen to fetch beverages and abruptly grabbed my hair from behind. She growled, "What? You think you're better than me?" I was surprised and perplexed. I questioned, "What are you talking about? I understand that when I stated I was popular, you were simply making jokes. I'm able to tell," she yelled. For a second, I did not know what to say. She had begun to make the plainly false claim that she had 7 lovers at one point. I made a sincere effort to listen, but knowing anything is made up makes it difficult to remain engaged. "You really think that being considered lovely makes you so amazing, don't you?" She snarled, her hands tightening on my hair. "That's just because our country relatives aren't used to seeing women like you." I tried to remain calm and remarked, "Lily, I'm not feeling great about this." But she wasn't done. She screamed, "Shut up," and pulled my hair even more. I'm the cutest person in this house. No, this neighborhood. Since I was little, people have told me that I'm cute. Don't let wearing makeup make you arrogant. Lily kept accusing me because she was never able to look beautiful, not even with makeup. "You're the cutest, Lily," I said, attempting to calm her down. "Observe? You're simply stating that," she retorted. "Throp pouts like you, with your fake concern, are so obvious." She gave me a shove that let go of my hair, and I landed hard on the ground. She remarked, "Don't get carried away just because you're called cute," and spat in my face, satisfied. "I'm so adorable," Lily exclaimed as she turned to leave. Naturally, Jack and my in-laws had to be informed about this situation. Everyone's look changed to "not again" when I told them the story. I discovered that Lily, like how she behaved at the family get-together, is a narcissist with an exaggerated sense of self-worth. Her late grandfather, who lavished affection on her as his only grandchild, turns out to be the source of this behavior. His constant insistence that she was more attractive than TV celebrities seems to have warped her sense of beauty. She seems to think she's the pinnacle of cuteness as a result. When she was younger, this led to problems and confrontations with her peers. All of them expressed regret for the trouble they had caused me, but they were unable to help. Jack and the in-laws say Lily doesn't seem to listen to anyone. I understood, but it was frustrating to hear that nothing could be done, especially when Lily's behavior wasn't just verbally abusive, but also physically harmful. I thought to myself they should do something about it. I even started considering divorce so soon after getting married. But then, within just 2 weeks, Lily brought home a man, introducing him as her fiancé. We were all surprised, as none of us had even heard that she was dating anyone. Her fiancé, Eric, was a serious-looking man with glasses who seemed timid and kept his head down. Lily, on the other hand, was acting tough and domineering. There was no sign of affection or intimacy between them, making me wonder if he was really okay with marrying Lily. While I was preparing coffee in the kitchen, lost in thought about the situation, Lily started berating me again. "Hey, housekeeper, hurry up with the coffee." This is what happens when dropouts who are unattractive try to do a simple task. "Don't keep my fiancé waiting. If this engagement gets called off, it's your fault," she snapped. Jack and the in-laws tried to calm her down, telling her that enough was enough, but she wouldn't listen. Just as I was about to respond, Eric looked up at me. His gaze was so intense that it caught me off guard. I was speechless and asked, "What? Why are you looking at me like that?" Then suddenly he exclaimed, "Sandra," and hugged me tightly. Lily, taken aback, let out a confused "huh." Everyone in the room was shocked. Eric continued, "You've been doing well. I was worried about you after you retired. There's no information about you online." I was flustered and mumbled, well. Eric quickly let go, realizing my discomfort. Lily, still confused, asked, "What's going on? Are you a fan of my marriage?" Eric, now more confident, proudly responded, "Yes, I'm a fan of Sandra." He seemed so different from the timid person we had seen earlier. Olivia, puzzled, asked, "Sandra? Who's that?" Jack then explained, "It's the idol group Lauren used to be part of." I nodded silently, unsure of how to respond. Amy Maria, later known as Amy and Maria, was the musical group I was part of during my teenage years. I moved to the city at 17 and performed under the stage name Pew until I was 20. While Amy Maria wasn't world famous, we had our share of popularity. Unfortunately, the group disbanded because of some members' misconduct, and I left the music industry when I was 21. I had been a lead member and the group's leader, and it was because of this that I dropped out of school. I chose to follow my dream, working part-time jobs to support myself, and I've never regretted that decision. Back when I was a teenager and later decided to marry Jack, I was working at an apparel shop. I had never mentioned my past as a musician to my in-laws or to Lily. The topic just never came up, and I felt it wasn't relevant to my current life. "Wow, you were a musician. That's amazing. Why didn't you tell us?" Olivia exclaimed, thrilled to learn something new about me. "I had some fame, but it wasn't enough to appear on TV," I explained, feeling a bit embarrassed about it. I didn't really think it was worth mentioning. Now being reminded of that part of my life in front of everyone, I felt a mix of emotions: pride, nostalgia, and a bit of embarrassment. Eric, still glaring at Lily, said, "Lily, you just said some harsh words to Sandra, didn't you?" Lily stumbled over her words, clearly taken aback by the sudden attention. "Oh well, she muttered, not sure how to respond. Eric didn't let up. "How could you say such things to Sandra? What right do you have to act all high and mighty?" He snapped. "You ugly girl." Suddenly, Eric's anger flared, and he yelled at Lily, leaving everyone in the room stunned. "What? These two are engaged," someone whispered in disbelief. I quickly intervened, trying to calm the situation down. "Eric, calm down. I'm not bothered by it. Don't be so harsh on her," I said, turning to him. But Eric wasn't ready to let it go. "No, Sandra, you're wrong." Eric raised his voice, his frustration clear. "She only approached me because I'm a doctor. She said she would marry anyone if it meant bragging to her sister-in-law." "That's not true, Eric," I said quietly, trying to de-escalate the situation. But Eric wasn't done. "A girl who proposes just after 3 weeks of dating means nothing to me," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. We were all dumbstruck by the unfolding drama. Apparently, Lily had planned to marry a high-status man just to boast to me. She had informed others that her degree had allowed her to marry a doctor. Lally had made a lot of connections before our wedding by going to any dinner parties and pursuing any man who seemed like a suitable fit. Naturally, finding such a great match wasn't simple. She had first casually admitted to attractive guys or people in powerful corporate positions, but all she met was failure. Lily met Dr. Eric a few weeks later. Lily turned her attention to Eric since she didn't want to pass up the opportunity to be with someone who was well paid. Having never been in a relationship before, Eric thought to himself, no one has ever pursued me so passionately. However, a week later, he heard Lily talking on the phone and understood the hard reality. She was only interested in marrying a doctor and wasn't really in love with him. Eric accepted her proposal in spite of this knowledge, thinking that perhaps in time, Lily might come to love him. Eric only wanted to grab the chance, and Lily, who was willing to settle for anyone, seemed strangely matched. However, I remained silent, since I believed that no one should weed a girl who denigrates other people. Lily was obviously scared by Eric's sudden fury, but Eric was beyond angry. Eric, who is usually rather calm, was furious, which caught everyone off guard. Whispering, Lily said, "What's so good about that dropout? That unattractive chick. You call Sandra ugly? How can you? It's you who doesn't have enough class." Eric shot back, growing more enraged. I chose to intervene, speaking quietly yet firmly. "Lily, you bring up my status as a dropout so much. Is it truly that awful?" I questioned, seeing as Eric's face became stern. "Of course it's bad without education," Lily shot back, trying, but failing, to sound assured. "But isn't the proprietor of your favorite eatery, who began chef training immediately following high school, also bad? What about your favorite actor that dropped out as well? Is it their fault that they didn't finish school?" I pressed the question. "That's different. They're in special professions." Lily stumbled as she attempted to support her claim. "Well, I too decided to skip out in order to pursue a unique profession as a musician. Does success mean it counts exclusively for me?" My gaze met hers as I posed a challenge. "I was genuinely surprised to learn that you were a musician," Lily mumbled. "Yeah, but even if you did know, you would have found another reason to insult me, wouldn't you?" I said, surprising Lily by surprise. She looked away, reluctant to look me in the eye. "Since you brought up education, let's talk about it." "I don't like to brag about it," I said. "You may boast about Princeton, but anyone can apply to any of your national institutions just by writing their name. Not to mention that you attended the state's lowest performing high school upon graduating. Do you simply take pride in your ability to write your name? Isn't that a little meaningless?" I grinned and replied, observing Lily's face flushed with shame. "Shut up," Lily growled, but she didn't sound very serious. "Wow, Lily, you're able to write your name. Do you feel satisfied now? Do you wish to belittle me? Lily, go on. You're quite talented." I clapped for her, saying mockingly. Eric chimed in, saying, "Aw, why had I overlooked Sandra? Fans are amazing for such an ugly girl." Even now, standing next to an adoring Eric, even though I didn't think I looked all that cute, Lily's demeanor fell apart. "This is the worst," she muttered, looking distraught. "I've never experienced such ridicule. I'm adorable. You realize that it's your fault. Furthermore, your personality isn't adorable either. It's not just about appearances." "I know I'm not the cutest either," I said, "but I'm not as bad as you. Perhaps begin by addressing your unpleasant personality." "What? Who believe you to be?" Anger twisted Lily's face. "You see, a woman's face ages with time," I said quietly. "It makes no sense to exaggerate how good you appear. The heart matters most because inner beauty radiates from the face." Olivia nodded and gave a clap of approval. "You said it quite well," she said. Jack laughed and said, "True. I used to like cute girls when I was younger, but when I started thinking about marriage, I began to value comfort and personality more. My father-in-law, Frank said sarcastically. Lily, you won't find happiness in marriage with your current attitude. People used to call you cute, but it was as a grandchild, not as attractive to the outside world. If you have a negative personality, you'll become unattractive on the inside as well. Feeling the weight of everyone's remarks, Lily let out a heavy sigh. She said, "This is just the worst," and broke down in tears. Even though my fiancé is crying, I can't help but think that a girl with a bad personality has an ugly crying face, Eric stated, displaying no pity. Let's end this relationship. I'm sure I'll get sucked into something like this. Sandra, I apologize for being sidetracked by her. And with that, Lily's engagement came to an abrupt stop. Everyone told her she needed to grow up and work on herself, so she was tossed out of the house. Lily was stubborn at first. She said, "I have friends. I won't let being kicked out bother me." But she was defeated when she got home after 5 days. I got ejected from my friend after a fight. With a desperate tone, she questioned, "Is it possible for me to return?" Despite spending a lot of time together, Lily's buddy seems to have recognized her shortcomings and was unwilling to take her in. Naturally, neither Jack nor my in-laws gave her back. They expressed regret to me for not acting sooner and that they had been spoiling Lily too much over the years. We were aware of what was going on, but we did nothing. "We apologize," they said. "I comprehend," I answered. "It's difficult for parents to send their child away, but she's already 21. She must accept responsibility for her conduct as an adult." Then Jack said that he had been plotting in private to provide Lily a separate home to live in apart from me. But before he could execute his strategy, Lily had already been expelled. He told me he was sorry he had made me go through that. If a husband doesn't do a better job of protecting his wife, I should get a divorce. I replied with a smile and a jest, "I guess you're safe this time." After that, Lily moved into an apartment of her own, but she didn't have an easy life. She had a sprained ankle after falling off her bike, was robbed, had men she met on a dating app ask for money, and even discovered that all of her oranges in her refrigerator had gone bad. Her previous transgressions appeared to be coming back to haunt her. Well, I hope she has luck. I'm too busy these days raising our young girl to give it much thought. She's maturing so quickly. It seems like yesterday was yesterday. She had been crawling, but now she was taking independent walks. She even recently told me, grinning broadly, "Mommy, I have a boyfriend." The boy is one of her kindergarten classmates. After playing house, they got to know one another and even made a small vow to marry each other someday. It's quite sweet and naive. Jack Mox sobbed while drinking his drink and said, "Don't leave, Dad, and get married," after learning about it. Naturally, we are both aware that their partnership is really a kid's game, similar to playing house. It also serves as a reminder of how fast children grow up. When the time comes, we will be there to support our little girl when she finds the person she truly wants to marry. Jack and I are devoted to helping her become the best version of herself up to that point. We wish to support her in growing into an even more amazing young lady, because she is our pride and delight. However, the journey to becoming a lady is still far from over, full with exciting new experiences and educational moments. And speaking of which, it's time for a quick talk and some cleaning up, because she just left a huge mess in the living room. She faces fresh obstacles and delights every day, and I can't wait to watch who she develops into. When I opened the freezer at -4 degrees F, I cried out. There was my daughter, 6 months old, that I had given to my husband. I quickly swooped her up and touched her cheek. She seemed chilly, and I could not hear her son. I fell down right then and there. Why is it now at this point? When I called my husband, he casually said our daughter was still doing okay. Lies. I made the decision to look into the man who had duped me and let our child suffer from this. What I found was unbelievable. I was so angry that I was determined to make my spouse suffer. Olivia is my name. I was a client and a restaurant owner when I met my husband, Michael, who is 5 years older than me. One of my regular hangouts with coworkers was the restaurant next to the publishing business where I work. Michael was constantly working hard in the restaurant, and I found myself appreciating that. We were reunited by fate, and our romance took off. When I was 34, we tied the knot and began our new life together in the restaurant's upstairs apartment. Not long after I moved in, I found out I was expecting. The look of excitement on Michael's face was priceless. Olivia, is that accurate? You succeeded. I will at last become a father. We shared ultrasound pictures from every checkup, looking forward to the day we would finally meet our child. I gave birth to our daughter, Mia, at the last minute after working virtually nonstop. We had a wonderful husband and a cute child, and even with the difficulties of being first-time parents, our lives was full of happiness. Since the birth of our child, Michael's work schedule has expanded, and during my maternity leave, I have handled the majority of household tasks and childcare. Though I knew there was nothing I could do about it, I was concerned for his welfare. "Aren't you getting enough sleep?" I inquired. In reply, he said, "Well, I'm managing somehow." At least he didn't have to commute. Our house was on the first floor of the eatery. He would leave every day for meetings, returning late at night, as there were plans for a new shop during this time. After closing his own business, he also went to other restaurants with staff members to brainstorm new menu items. He'd sleep until the very last minute before getting ready, so mornings were a blur. Unfortunately, he didn't have much time for Maya because of his hectic schedule. "Hey, would you accompany me tomorrow on your day off to buy some children's clothes?" "No way. I'm worn out. On the day the store closes, is it not possible for me to sleep?" My spouse appeared to be depressed due to his work-related exhaustion. He cried, "Enough," as our daughter fussed awake in the middle of the night, put an end to her wailing. In addition, he flung nearby things at us out of fury. "Maya is still a baby. It can't be helped." I attempted to reason with him, but he wouldn't listen. After a while, he said, "Enough already. I'll spend the night at the store." He stormed out of the house after saying those things. I kept telling myself maybe Michael wouldn't feel the same way until circumstances with the new shop calmed down. Nevertheless, nothing appeared to have changed by the time our baby became 3 months old. My closest friend wanted me to attend her wedding, which was taking place in 3 months at a resort in the United States, according to a message I received at that time. I told her it to be challenging, but she persisted and even asked me to give a speech. I reasoned that it would be impossible to leave Mia with Michael. It would be a problem for my folks to travel here because they lived far away. Michael's aging parents were nearby, but I was hesitant to ask them to look after our infant. I'd love to see the bride and celebrate. I sighed as I looked at the invitation. Just then, my husband approached, glancing at what was in my hands. "A friend's wedding?" he asked. "Yeah," I replied. "It's in 3 months, but with Mia, I'm considering declining." "Go ahead and attend," he said. I was taken aback. "What do you mean?" I asked. He replied, the wedding. Since I'll take a break from the shop and take care of Mia, you should go." His unexpected suggestion left me speechless, and I couldn't respond immediately. "Are you sure?" Even though it's a resort location within the US, it's quite far. And if something happens, I won't be able to return quickly because of the flight. I expressed my concerns, but he reassured me. "It's okay. Take a break once in a while." Thank you. I had honest concerns about my husband, who hadn't been involved in taking care of our daughter much since she was born. Could he handle it alone for several days? However, I didn't want to dampen his enthusiasm, so I swallowed my words and asked him to do it. Over the next 3 months, I carefully taught Michael how to take care of Mia, considering his schedule. On the day I departed for my friend's wedding, I said, "Take care." Yeah. Leave it to me. Have a great time." I entrusted our daughter to him and left home as planned. However, upon arriving at the airport, an announcement informed me that the flight was canceled due to sudden bad weather. I contacted my friend to apologize for the last-minute cancellation. As I tried to call Michael to explain, there was no answer. Is he struggling with taking care of Mia? I wondered. Imagining that scene made me feel somewhat amused. I decided not to bother sending an email, assuming he wouldn't have time to read it, and returned home. When I arrived home, drenched in the sideways rain, neither my husband nor our daughter was in the living room or the bedroom. Yet, considering the stormy weather, it seemed unlikely they had gone out since it was the shop's scheduled day off. I ventured downstairs just to be sure. The atmosphere there was eerily quiet, and I couldn't sense anyone's presence. However, the light in the pantry, where he kept the freezer and other supplies, was on. Did someone forget to turn it off? As I stepped into the room, I noticed that the freezer door was slightly ajar, allowing cold air to escape. Concerned about the perishable items inside, I decided to check. When I opened the door, I screamed. I was met with a chilling sight. Our 6-month-old daughter, Mia, placed in a basket and stored in the freezer at a bone-chilling -4 degrees F. I immediately pulled her out and held her close. Mia, stay with me." Her face was icy, and she made no sound. Despair washed over me as I cradled her, but I knew I had to act quickly. I called an ambulance, and as they rushed me out to the emergency room, I silently prayed for her safety. Why did this happen? Where on earth is Michael? I called my husband repeatedly, but each time it went straight to voicemail without connecting. Frustrated, I decided to test the waters by sending him an email, intentionally asking about our daughter's well-being. To my surprise, I received a message saying, "Maya is happily playing. Enjoy the wedding." Yet at that very moment, our daughter was still receiving medical treatment behind that door. Liar. The rage I felt toward Michael was boiling inside me. It was then that I resolved to seek thorough revenge against him and took action. 3 days later, my husband returned home. Instead of heading for our house, he went straight to the shop. I watched his actions through the baby monitor camera I had installed in the shop from our upstairs residence. Without hesitation, he walked toward the room where the freezer was located. Through the camera, he seemed somewhat frantic. Whoa! His scream echoed all the way to the 2nd floor. I quietly followed him downstairs and stood behind him. He muttered something almost like a chant. "Why are you shouting so loudly? I can hear you all the way upstairs." Startled, he turned around when he noticed my presence. "Ha! Why?" he stammered. Maya would be frightened. Was she behaving well? I asked, noticing our daughter's clothes behind him. As I leaned in to see Mia's face, Michael used his entire body to block me. "I want to hold her quickly, so could you move aside?" he stammered. "No, she's sleeping now. It's better to leave her alone." But I couldn't wait, even just for her sleeping face. "Ah!" I screamed, and Michael awkwardly averted his eyes. "What's going on? Where's Maya?" I demanded. He hesitated. "Well, you see, it was no wonder the bass in the freezer should have contained our daughter, but instead, there was a baby doll dressed in Mia's clothes. Of course, it was all my doing, a carefully orchestrated performance. Please bear with this exchange a little longer. This was just her plaything." "Really? So where's Maya?" She's being looked after." "Yes, she's temporarily with someone else." Michael piled on the lies, desperately trying to salvage the situation. Then he looked at me, realization dawning on his face. "Why are you here? Wasn't your return scheduled for the evening? If I returned home early, would it cause any problems?" "No, it's not like that. In reality, when I decided to take revenge on Michael, I had sent him an email. It stated that I would continue entrusting our daughter to him and that I would return home 3 days later in the evening. That email was a lie. On that day, the flight was canceled due to bad weather, so I couldn't go. That's why I immediately returned home." "Huh? I didn't hear anything about that. Why didn't you contact me sooner?" "But it wasn't you who didn't answer. Even so, I also miss calls sometimes." Michael, who had been assertive until then, grew increasingly timid. Toward the end, he mumbled so softly that I could barely hear him. However, whether he answered the phone at that moment no longer mattered. My anger wasn't about such trivial matters. Claiming that you left Mia with someone else was a lie, right? After all, when I returned home, you weren't here, and our daughter was in the freezer. Did you know? And yet you even used such a doll to play a disgusting prank." Michael retorted, growing defensive as he approached me, but I stood my ground. "Who's the real lowest of the low? When I asked you about Maya's well-being in that email, you said she was happily playing." Michael's face twisted in frustration, and yet at that moment, she was already at the hospital. "You liar. What were you doing?" Tears welled up as I confronted him, but he avoided eye contact, turning away in silence. "Say something," I declared, thrusting a piece of paper in front of my husband's nose. "Huh. You were out here, weren't you?" The paper was a schedule for a trip. "Well, it's because we suddenly had a meeting for the new shop at the hotel. Akem. But the reservation was made 3 months ago, right after I decided to attend my friend's wedding. As I checked the date, it aligned with the moment I committed to the wedding." Michael seemed to panic again, avoiding eye contact and falling silent. "Moreover, you reserved a couple's plan at the hotel." "Huh. I wasn't invited. It was something I saw on TV, a popular option. I thought it might benefit our shop, so I went for research." His feeble excuses only increased my suspicion. A faint sheen of sweat appeared on his forehead. "Well, so you took your employees along?" "Yeah, like a company trip." I inwardly sighed at Michael's ever-changing explanations, but now it was showtime. I couldn't afford to drag out this exchange any longer. "What part of this is a business trip?" I confronted him, presenting several photos. They showed my husband posing happily with another woman at tourist spots and getting cozy in bathrobes at the hotel. Clearly, it wasn't a work-related trip. They looked like a couple on vacation. Michael pulled out his phone, glancing between the photos I'd handed him and his screen, looking flustered. How did you get these pictures? He demanded, showing me his phone. To his surprise, the same images I printed were displayed there. I smirked at him. Did you forget that your phone's contents are accessible from a computer? Michael's face fell as he remembered. You see, he'd previously helped create greeting cards for a customer using his phone data, including addresses. He'd linked his phone and computer, allowing me to access reservation details and even the photos sent by his affair partner from the tourist spots. Moreover, isn't she one of your employees? No wonder you confidently called it a company trip. Michael's affair partner was indeed a 28-year-old woman named Sophia who worked at his restaurant. To think I was being cheated on right under my nose. Honestly, it's quite shocking. It's hard to see what is under your nose. Michael tried to deflect with a joke, but there was no sign of remorse. I had no lingering feelings for a man like him. I can't forgive what you did to Mia, more than your infidelity, I declared. Well, if you've already found out, there's no helping it, Michael retorted, wearing a defiant smile. I wanted to be with Sophia, and I planned to divorce you. As for child support, well, that's another matter. Paying for Maya is a bit much. He seemed reluctant to spend unnecessarily on child support. That's when he saw me agonizing over attending my friend's wedding. Michael had an idea. If he got rid of the daughter, all problems would vanish. So that day, he locked Mia in the freezer and set off confidently on his affair trip. His plan was to handle it before I returned home and find a clever excuse for her death. Well, it's all ruined because of you. I felt nothing but disgust as he grinned. So where's Maya? When's the funeral? What are you talking about? I'm asking about her. What happened to her? Michael's frustration was evident in his tone. Maya is fine right now. My mom is with her at the hospital. What? Is she alive? He looked visibly disappointed. I had discovered Mia shortly after Michael left the house. Her face was cold, and she wasn't crying. I had braced myself for the worst, but while waiting for the ambulance, Mia opened her eyes, yawned, and cried loudly. It seemed she had slept soundly even in that situation. The hospital conducted thorough tests, but there were no abnormalities, considering her young age, just 6 months. They decided on a slightly longer hospital stay. The freezer had been slightly ajar, and I found her soon after Michael's departure. Mia's survival was a combination of luck, her age, the short time she was inside, and the fortunate circumstances. While I can say this now that she's safe, I'm still amazed by Mia's resilience, how she could sleep soundly anywhere undisturbed. I'll report this incident to the police, I declared. Huh? Why? She's safe now, so what's the problem? Upon hearing the word police, his eyes widened, and he looked flustered. That's not the issue. What you did could have cost our child's life. If things had gone wrong, damn it, why didn't the plane fly? If you had attended the wedding, my plan would have been foolproof. He defiantly paced around me, spitting as he spoke. It seemed he lacked any awareness of his wrongdoing. To make him acknowledge his guilt, I planned to involve the police and seek severe consequences. But first, I had another way to teach him a lesson regarding this matter. I'll have it written up in the magazine. The reputation of this shop will take a nosedive. Wait a minute. That's unfair. It's an abuse of authority. Michael stopped in his tracks and grabbed my shoulder, but I shook off his hand with all my strength. All I'm doing is my job. I used to work for a publishing company that was in charge of the magazine department. Perhaps you forgot. I used to go to my husband's restaurant, which was excellent, but not very well known, before we were married. As a result, I included it in an article for the E-Reporter's Hidden Gem Restaurants area, and it soon flourished. That's how I gained Michael's appreciation and finally started dating and got married to him. My spouse is quite nervous because he is aware of the consequences of being published in a magazine. I even have plans for a new branch, but I've come this far. Our sales are going to be horribly affected by a review like that, and I will be completely untrustworthy. Our way of life will suffer if that occurs, but I'm not aware of it. Mia, and you will be just as impacted, won't you? He kept trying to convince me, pleading with me. Hold on. I take it that you wanted to be with your partner in the affair and were intending to file for divorce from me. Then, it makes no difference what occurs to us. That, well, is the circumstances. Thus, the documentation is ready. Sign it right now. In addition, I'll be requesting child support and alimony. I waved the divorce decree in my spouse's face. He grabbed them from me and fixed his intense gaze on them. At last acknowledging the truth, Michael abruptly started apologizing. I apologize. Please pardon me. Please keep this from the police. And I want you to think again about getting a divorce. He was so pathetic that even as he cried out in desperation, I couldn't help but think of my husband. We don't need the cops if an apology suffices. Live with your regrets and move on. I pulled him away with a forceful tone, and Michael fell to the ground sobbing. After that, my spouse and I formalized our divorce. I asked that he and his lover pay me a total of $20,000 for his affair. We also decided that he would pay our daughter's child support in full, at an amount of $63,000. My husband set up this incident out of fear of needless spending, knowing full well the severe repercussions he would face. Michael was questioned and the police were notified. He was then taken into custody and given a jail sentence. This episode was widely publicized in publications and made headlines in the news, even without my publishing an article. In addition, our daughter's freezer-keeping experience sparked a barrage of negative comments on social media, where I had posted details about the restaurant. The restaurant closed down quickly as a result of its sharp decline in reputation. My spouse had to pay for his acts because he had nowhere to go back to. Conversely, I began a new life with my kid. Michael had never had any parental responsibilities. Thus, his absence had no effect. Mia is having a happy childhood, and I'm going to keep trying to make her smile. How did you come upon this tale? Make sure you subscribe to the channel as well. Till then, enjoy our upcoming video.